Hi viewers, this is Salahuddin with the lecture number 22. In the previous lecture we talked about Fit the Elder, and today we will talk about a very important topic of the British history, and the topic is all the 18th century wars in English history were trade wars. So we will talk about all those wars that, that were fought in the history of English literature. We will talk about one by one those wars, and then we will talk about the causes of those wars, why those wars were fought, and then we will talk about the significance of those wars. So, coming to the point and coming to the topic, all the 18th century wars were trade wars. So, how those wars were trade wars? Uh, if we look uh, at the history of English literature, British history, definitely we will come across number of wars, and definitely we will also come across the trade which has been the prominent factor in in those wars. So European powers wanted to destroy the trade of one another in order to improve their own trade. So, what were those powers that were fighting wars for trade? So, among those important and significant powers were the England, Portugal, Spain, and Holland. These were few great powers in Europe who were in a kind of loggerheads with each other and trying to subdue and subjugate each other through different means. In this regard, they remain in tussle, they remain in a kind of confrontation with each other in one way or another way. So those important wars, those wars that were fought for trade, just to mention few, were the War of Spanish Succession that was fought between 1702 to 1713, and then the War of American Independence, and then we have the Years War. We have War of Austrian Succession, Jenkins' Ear War that we talked in detail, and the war that took place in the subcontinent, and as a result of which Pakistan and India came into being. So we will talk about all these wars in detail. Uh, First, coming to the causes of the 18th century wars and the war that was fought in the 18th century. So the War of English Succession that was fought in 1689 to 1697. As we talked in the very start of this session, the glorious revolution. William III had been a better enemy of Louis XIV of France, and he had also come to know the French occupation of Belgium would create serious problems to the English Navy, and so making problems for the English Navy was definitely a kind of threat to the trade of England, and thus occupation of Belgium by the French army or the French Navy was a kind of serious blow to the English trade. So thus the succession of William to the throne of England, and then the support support from the English people, and of course the confrontation by the French was resultantly the cause of the trade or the commercial interest of both countries. So this was the first war that took place due to the interest or commercial interest. Secondly, we have War of Spanish Succession, which was also fought as a result of trade between France and England, and some other allies came plunged in this war. The War of Spanish Succession that took place in 1702 to 1713, and resultantly, lastly, it was concluded as a result of a treaty, and the treaty is known as Utrecht Treaty. We have detailed discussion on this treaty, on this war even in the previous lectures. So we are not going in detail, but we are just coming to the points that how this war was part trade. When the Spanish with the Spanish throne in the hands of Philip V, the grandson of Louis XIV of France. So when Philip, who was the grandson of Louis XIV, and Louis XIV was the emperor of France, who got monopoly of trading with the Spanish colonies. So getting this kind of monopoly in the Spanish colony was, of course, a great threat to the trade of England. The English maintained this supremacy in the Mediterranean Sea by acquisition of Gibraltar and Minorca, which improved the British trade. So this war, at the end, English were given some benefits, but though the war was part for the commercial interest, then later on England was given the Gibraltar Strait, the Gibraltar way through which their ships, through which their commercial import and export took place through sea. So thus this strait was later on given to England. So of course the War of Spanish Succession was also of primarily part for the trade. And then we have the third war that was also part in the 18th century, and that was War of Jenkins' Ear, which was part between 1713 to 1739 to 1742. In this war we also have discussion in the previous lecture that this war was part because of trade. How? In this way, the English had got the privilege to have trade with the Spanish colonies, and when the English, they were having trade relations, they having trade with the Spanish colonies, they misuse this opportunity and using or taking benefits of that misuse. The Spanish, they came in rage and capture English ship, in which Captain Jenkins' ear, his ear was cut in this war. So thus the English were in a kind of enraged and were trying to revenge the Jenkins. So thus the war took place between Spain and England. So this war was also part for trade. And then we have the War of Austrian Succession, which took place in 1740 to 1748. In this War of Austrian Succession, when Maria Theresa, a weak ruler finding her a uh, weak ruler, the king of Prussia captured Silesia, and Maria Theresa, when came in power, so Prussia, finding her a weak ruler, uh, capture her the territory of Austria, which is known as Silesia. So this Silesia territory was famous for trade. It was full of resources. So Prussia, to take advantage of that area of Austria, uh, uh, took the control of Silesia, which resulted in a war between the Austria and Prussia, and later on the great powers, France and England, also plunged and thus taking the side of Prussia and Austria, and a full-fledged war took place. So this war is known in Austrian Succession. Then we have wars in India. Uh, in India, we had French colonies, we had Portuguese, and we had English colonies. Later on, it was left on English. The three Carnatic wars in India between England and the French had commercial grounds, because both of them wanted to develop their trade with India by undermining each other. So they had wars. The English were trying to subdue the French in India, and the French were also trying to defeat India in India for the sake of uh, exerting their influence and enriching their resources. Thus, the wars that took place in India were also trade wars. So then we have the wars in American colonies. In American colonies, America was also a colony of British, and before British, it was the colony of French and Portuguese. They would go there and would would flourishing colonies and taking benefits of the resources of the America. The English and French were great commercial rivals in America. Both of them wanted to establish their colonies along the river of Mississippi and its branches. So, America, which is a kind of island and completely covered from every side by water, so America had very rich resources in this regard for the import and export, and have variety of ways through which the naval or the sea routes can be utilized in the best interest. So thus the wars that took place and later on resulted into the war of American independence were fought for trade or commercial interest. And then we have a 7 years war which took place in 1756 to 1763. And as we talked that England and France were already fighting for the colonies of Nova Scotia, Ohio Valley, and Ohio Valley in America. In 1713, according to the Treaty of Utrecht, the French had to give the province of Nova Scotia to English, but it always remained in eyesore power to the French. So the 7 year years war was basically fought for a territory which is known as Nova Scotia and Ohio Valley in America. So according to the Treaty of Utrecht, these two territories are to be given to England. So when these two territories, Nova Scotia and Ohio Valley, these were given to England, the French always thought of getting revenge, and it remained a kind of eyesore for the French. So thus the Cold War, or the war taking different shapes remain remain between England and France. Then we have American War of Independence, which of course took place between 1775 to 1783. American people were against the idea that they should be considered as milch cow. Milch cow means that to 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 absorb their resources and letting them remain is a mere source of their exploitation. So navigation acts were badly or seriously imposed, and those navigation acts were 1651 and 1660 and 1689. And according to this act, very harsh and rigorous punishment was given to the American colonies, because under these restrictions they could not exceed their import export. They were also restricted to some specific materials to be made in the colonies of America, and some restriction or limitation were also imposed on the American colonies. There these stuffs like hat, जिसे हम टोपी कहते हैं, hat, steel, cotton, and some other day-to-day life stuffs, they were strictly prohibited on the American colonies, that you are not supposed to manufacture these stuffs and could be used for import or export. So then is a very long story there if we start talking about the War of American Independence, but we will talk later on in the next lecture about the causes and the results of American War of Independence. So thus these limitations and they were imposed, and the British they were also the French were also defeated at many places, and then the French were seeking revenge of their defeat, and they took the side of the English, the American colonies, and thus the American colonies also remain on this hope to get a kind of assistance from the French army and navy to get rid of the English people. So then we have the French Revolution, was another war of the 18th century that was part for commercial interest. During the revolution, Napoleon wanted to destroy the English trade, and England was kind of eyesore by the French in every aspect, and Napoleon could not bear the English is a prospering nation or is a developed nation. So he started Napoleon started Continental System with the view that the countries under his influence might have no trade relation with England. The Continental System was that system in which Napoleon designed certain blockades and to paralyze Great Britain through the destruction through the kind of destruction of English commercial interest. So the French or the Napoleon who would impose or influence those states which had a relation with England could not have trade relation with England. So this exerting influence are forcing those countries that may not have relation with England. The English will ultimately collapse and her trade will collapse. Thus, it will become a weak power and could be easily defeated or could be easily occupied. So this was a continental system, destroying the trade of England in order to take advantage of the destruction of England. So these were wars that took place in the 18th century. Uh, in conclusion, we can say that in the beginning, all the countries, Spain, France, Holland, Portugal, and England, were rivals in trade, but later on, only the French and the English continue to be uh, main contestants. So let's have a recap of those wars that took place in the 18th century. Uh, as we talked in the start of this lecture, that the war that took place by the commercial interest are as a result of trade. So these wars are known as trade wars. What were those wars that took place? Among those, the War of Spanish Succession, the Jenkins Years War. Then we have war between England and France and American colonies, and then we have 7 year war, 7 years war. Then we have American War of Independence, and then we have French Revolution. So these wars took place in the 18th century and primarily for the trade and trust. So thank you so much for watching the video.